Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Neurosynergy, the Brain Body Healing Podcast. This is the space where science meets soul, where we slow conversations down enough to understand what is happening inside the human system and where healing is explored as a multi-dimensional journey. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Young. I'm a neurointegrative clinician and speech language pathologist. Much of my work centers on helping people reconnect the dots between brain, the nervous system, emotional experience, and the deeper levels of identity and meaning that shape how we live our lives. One of the things we do intentionally on this podcast is create clarity. Because when things feel confusing or overwhelming, clarity creates safety for us. And when the nervous system feels safe, it's so much easier for people to access insight, choices, and deeper healing. Today's conversation moves into a space that sits at the intersection of neuroscience, somatic healing, and intuition. We're exploring what it means to reconnect not only with the body, but also with our inner knowing, and how healing often involves learning to trust signals that many people have been taught to ignore. Today, I'm so grateful to be joined by Tracy Fance. Tracy offers a range of intuitive and spiritual services, including clairvoyant and mediumship work, as well as somatic and intuitive practices designed to help people release trauma that's held in their bodies. Her work also supports women in developing their own intuitive abilities so that they can live in alignment with both their spiritual awareness and the human experience. And what I really appreciate about Tracy's work is that it brings together two worlds that are often kept separate: the body and intuition, the nervous system and spiritual awareness, and helps people understand how those systems are actually deeply connected. Tracy, welcome. We are so glad to have you today.
Hi there. I'm so looking forward to this. I love that intro. I was transfixed.
I love that so much. Before we begin, I always like to start with just a gentle arrival check in with each other. Healing conversations often land differently just when we take a moment to step into that space together. So I'm curious, how are you arriving today, whether that's physically, energetically, emotionally, however you feel?
Wow. I will be honest, it has been a really full on week because I'm preparing for a 3-day challenge and nobody told me how much work there was involved. And I was quite tired and jaded. And then we started chatting, and straight away, I found my energy levels going back up and my zing has come back. So that energetic connection is exactly what I needed. Don't need a cup of coffee, don't need any high energy drinks. I'm back there. So thank you for that.
I love that so much. I'm so glad you're here and you get to share this space with us. Before we go deeper, I'd love to just pause and ground a few terms that are going to come up today in our conversation. One of the intentions is just to make sure our listeners feel oriented, supported, and grounded, especially when we're exploring deep topics, right? That might be new or unfamiliar. One term that may come up is intuition. People often hear that word, but they're not sure what it means in a practical sense. When you talk about intuition, how do you define that in a way that feels accessible and grounded?
Okay, so we are all born with intuition. It's not something that the privileged few have, it's just a part of us. Okay. And the difficulty is everybody's intuition interacts and communicates with them differently. So for some, it might be an inner voice. For some, they might just know that they're in danger or they know that they can relax, they're safe. For some, it could just be a sensation in the body that just catches their attention and brings their awareness to that moment rather than our habit of walking around, in a world of our own or oblivious to what's happening. But when that intuition fires up and in whatever way, it just makes us jolt. and come back to that awareness, which goes back to when we were the Stone Age man and we were, out hunter gathering. And if you felt eyes on you, you needed to get the heck out of there because you didn't know whether it was someone from your tribe, saber-toothed tiger, or, someone, coming to do harm to your tribe. So the difficulty in explaining it is explain to people that every one of us is different. So mine will be different to yours, okay? And yours is different to mine. It's it's getting that understanding of how our intuition works. So you can call it a sixth sense, you can call it an inner knowing. It's really difficult to put a definite definition on it because it operates so differently. But it's not your logical brain going, "Oh, I won't put my hand in that fire because that's gonna jolly well hurt." Okay, that's your left brain logic. Intuitive part is when we do something with no logical reason or we do it instinctively because it just feels right. Does that explain it well or not?
That was the most beautiful definition I've actually ever heard, and I really love how you made it very grounded, very practical, very human. And I also love how you pointed out that we're not all the same. It's not something that the select people have. This isn't, it's part of who we are, right? As spiritual beings having that human experience. So thank you for that. Another phrase you use in your healing and in your work is somatic healing. From a clinical perspective, somatic refers to the body.
Mhm,
So, somatic healing involves working with how experiences, especially stress or trauma, either big T or little t, as we like to say,
mhm.
are held in the body. How do you explain somatic work to someone who's never experienced it before?
Okay. So imagine when we're cold and we hunch up because we're cold and we're shivering and we're trying to get warm. And then the next day we might go, I really ache. And you go, oh, that must have been from, being so cold and tense yesterday. And then, of course, we just completely forget about it and move on. So, somatically, when things happen to us, whether it's somebody that says something or we hear something on the news, or maybe we have a near miss when we're out driving our car, all those little ouch moments build up in the body like that tension when we were cold. But unfortunately, we're not aware of it. So I always say it's a little bit like the little lights on the dashboard of your car, and the oil light comes on, and you can either stick sticky tape over it and hope it goes away, or you take it to the garage and they go, oh, you need more oil. Let me put you some oil in. With our bodies, the equivalent of that is when we get a headache, when we get back pain, when we have a migraine or whatever it might be. And that is your body's engine management going, whoa, whoa, overload, too much, something needs to go. And literally with the somatic, we just need to release that internal pressure, that trauma that the body has held on to and tensed up over. And when we let it go, the health condition, the chronic pain, whatever it might be, can then go because it was just trying to get our attention and going, you need to slow down, you need to sort yourself out. So it's literally just the release valve that our body needs to let go of all that collected pain and trauma. And you're very right when you say big T, little t, because it might not sound much, and especially in the UK, I don't know what it's like where you are. In the UK, our biggest phobia is public speaking. Most people hate it. They don't even want to get up in the office with their colleagues and talk about something they know really well. And I'm pretty certain, but I don't have data on this, that goes back to being made to read out loud in English when you're at first school, and you maybe stumble over a word and all the other kids are laughing at you, or the teacher, you know, critiques you with all the best intentions, but the child is hearing ridicule and they're being laughed at, and nobody wants to be judged, let's face it. So that poor child is like, I'm never reading out loud again. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. That little trauma is big to that 4 or 5-year old child. It's huge. And so those sorts of little traumas, they sound silly when we look back, but they can actually cause problems for the next 40 years of your life if you haven't had the opportunity to talk that through or to be able to sit and think about it and let it out. So, we're not good at sitting and processing anymore.
Yeah, and I also feel like awareness, we're so used to living and going and doing that. A lot of us, it can be very difficult to like take a step back and kind of zoom out and look at what you're doing and become aware of like what's running me and realize that it doesn't have to, right? We can always work with that as long as we know what that is. And one more concept that is going to come up today is the alignment between the spiritual and the human self. That idea that we're both physical beings, but we're also something much, much more expansive. What does alignment mean in that context?
Okay. Well, as with anything else, if you aren't living in alignment to who you are, so let's say you're doing a job that you hate, or it's not aligned with your values, like you are very heart centered and you're working for a corporate that just wants to get as much money out of people as possible and they don't care about anything else. You're going to be going, hang on, this isn't fitting me. I can't be this heart-centered person over here and then be this person over here that's just out to take as much money off our clients as possible. So when we look at the spiritual and the human, we can't just be human because whether we believe in it or not, all of those rules that govern our spiritual self are still at play. So, we might talk about things like law of attraction, which is manifesting. Well, whether you believe in that or not, you can still make it happen, but you just don't know the rules. Things like karma, which is not punishment, karma is cause and effect. If I do this, that happens. Okay. So if we're trying to just be human, that means that there's a load of stuff going on that we're working against and we could work with it. And similarly, you can't be all totally spiritual unless you're a monk and live on the top of a mountain. You've got to live in the human world. And so you have to bring the two together and be the balance of the two. And so quite often we're so busy being human and dealing with our human problems, existence, etc., we're just not taking the time, or maybe people don't believe that there is that spiritual aspect to us. So they just completely ignore it. And then they feel like something's not right, or they feel like they're not whole, but they don't know what it is that's missing.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much. Let's talk about your story. Many people who move into intuitive or healing work arrive there through their own experiences. Was there a moment or even a series of experiences that led you into this path of combining intuitive awareness with somatic healing?
Goodness, absolutely. So, as a child, I didn't have imaginary friends. I didn't talk to dead people. I didn't walk up to people and tell them stuff that I wasn't supposed to know or that nobody could guess. But I did have lots of weird night events, like feeling that there was a presence in my room and having night paralysis and not being able to turn over and see who or what was there, which was when I was about 4 or 5. So that was really scary. So I kind of decided I didn't like that and I put the lid on it. And then from that point onwards, I don't even know to this day what made me do it. I was absolutely fascinated with anything to do with past lives, reincarnation, spontaneous combustion, which is where people just suddenly burst into flames, aliens, and goodness knows what else. And then into my teens and 20s, I was just obsessed with being psychic. And again, I don't know why, and I don't know what I thought I was going to do with it, even if I was psychic. Eventually, somebody said to me, well, actually, you are psychic. They gave me a jumper. I did a reading from the jumper, which is called psychometry. And I can still see the pictures that I got back then, now. And this is like nearly 30 years later. And then I had to go, well, okay, so now what do I do? I don't know what to do with it. So it's like having this superpower, but you don't know how it works. Okay. So eventually, there was this massive book in 96 called The Celestine Prophecies. I don't know whether you would have come across that. fabulous book. And everybody was reading it who was remotely spiritual. And luckily, the book club I was in ran a metaphysical shop and they decided to start a development circle. And it kind of went from there. And so I learned all sorts of things to do with intuition and being psychic and stuff. And then they eventually handed me on to another circle. And then it became my business. Ever since, I've been doing this for a living. And I honestly, truly can say this is not where I thought I'd end up. I honestly, my careers teacher did not ask if I fancied being a tarot reader, let me tell you. That wasn't an option. And the somatic bit, that kind of came from when I trained in Reiki, which is an energy healing modality, which started in Japan. And as part of my training, my Reiki teacher gave me a book to read, which was all about the body mind connection. And that just absolutely floored me. And that was, I think, 2005. And I've been building on that ever since, bringing in other skills that I've got, like my NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, which is more scientific than it is intuitive. I'm also trained in hypnosis. Plus, obviously, I've got all my intuitive practices. So I kind of put it all together and I've helped people get rid of underactive thyroids, chronic migraine, chronic pain, just so many things, fibromyalgia. And it is all down to that body mind connection. And it's been a really interesting and fascinating journey.
I love that. I remember my eldest sister gave me the Celestine Prophecy to read when I was like 12 years old, and I just really loved it. And I remember being at school and one of the teachers came and they were like, "You're reading that?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's a really great book." He's like, "I'm really surprised that you're reading that," because I was so I guess he assumed that I was so young and maybe it was above me, but I also really, really enjoyed that series as well. What I often noticed in conversations like this is that people begin by trying to understand it through logic, but then at some point they realize that there's other forms of knowing, sensory knowing, emotional knowing. And learning to trust these forms of information can be such a big shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of people, because society is so cerebral, so logical, that that's where they start. And then depending on what path they take, certainly my path meant that by doing it, by practicing using all these spiritual senses like clairvoyance, clairaudience, etc., just by doing it and giving a message to somebody or telling them something about themselves, and they would go, "Oh my God, yeah, that's spot on. Thanks very much." That just built that level of trust to the point where I didn't question. I stopped looking for the proof, if you like, because the message was the proof. For my partner, I'm actually really lucky because my partner actually sees physical spirit. So our senses can either be subjective, which means they're inside us, or objective, which means they're outside of us. So when I see or hear on a spiritual level, it's in my head. It's not like a disembodied voice or a vision in front of me. But there's plenty of people that is exactly how theirs manifests. So my partner, when he sees spirits or ghosts, he will see them physically outside of him. Okay. I don't want to see that. I'm quite happy not to. Thanks very much. But he has seen me give people messages. He has borne witness to the confirmation from these people. So he implicitly trusts what I get, even though he's actually quite logical. And even he just is not expecting logic to quantify and to help him understand this. He just accepts it because he's seen it in action. And I honestly, truly think that there are some people you could materialize their dead granny in front of them and they're still not going to believe. They have chosen they're not going to believe. I think it's healthy to be skeptical and go, okay, I really need evidence before I can be on board. And I love chatting to people like that because they are actually open minded. They just haven't had enough evidence to go, okay, I'm on board. Whereas the other guys, they might as well just be going, la, 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 I don't want to hear it because they're just not going to take it on board. And if we go and investigate, whether we go to a spiritual church, whether we go for a one-to-one reading or some healing or whatever it might be, we can get the results, which are the proof, even if you can't see it working. But I can't see oxygen, but I know it's there and I breathe it, thank God. So I always say to people, is the evidence that it exists necessary before you believe? And for most people, they don't need that.
Let's talk more about intuition. As you were talking, I just kept thinking how it reminds me of a muscle. If you're not used to using that as a tool, right? You're not used to working with that and living with that. I've experienced it much like a muscle,
Mm.
right? And that repetition of coming back to that again and again. And through your own experiences, you're learning that in alignment, right? You kind of get that solidity under your feet. But that process, I don't know about for you, but that process of the using the muscle, it can feel a little bit like floating.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like there's not any ground. And, many people feel disconnected from their intuition and they're not even sure if they can trust it. So, what do you think? How can someone begin to recognize their intuition? And how can they kind of move past that fear or overthinking?
Okay. Wow, there's a lot in there. So the first thing is like some people doubt that they even have any intuition. Okay. But for those people who are a parent, when you get that moment when you feel like your child, there's something wrong, maybe they're at school, maybe they're around your mother's being babysat or they're around a friend, you will pick up that phone. If necessary, you will run in bare feet to go around there and just check they are okay. That is your intuition. Okay. Now, as I said earlier, everybody's works differently. So, the first thing that I do when I'm working with people is to help them understand, are they seeing it, hearing it, feeling it, or just knowing it? Which I will be honest, that's the hardest one of the senses because it's just so spurious. It's like, well, how do I know that? Okay. Now, I can only tell you what mine is like. So for me, let's say I'm looking out the windows, beautiful blue skies, and I'm about to go out. All right, I better put my coat on and get myself organized. There'll be this little voice at the back of my head in the bottom right by the occipital bone, and it'll go, take an umbrella. And then this loud voice at the front of my head will go, it's blue skies, it's 25 degrees. Nah, don't take the umbrella. You'll only leave it somewhere or lose it. Don't be silly. And if I listen to that voice, you can bet money that I'll be wishing that I'd got it for some reason. Now, it might be that I twist my ankle and it would have been a great crutch. Doesn't have to be rain. Or I could have been using it to prod somebody who was being annoying. Not that I would do that. Or it could literally be that it does rain and I need that brolly. And I'm like, why didn't I bring that umbrella with me? Okay. So that little quiet voice that I hear in my head, that whisper is my intuition. And the loud voice is my ego. Okay. And the ego wants to protect us. It doesn't want us to be judged. It doesn't want us to be made to look silly. It doesn't want us to listen to the intuition. So 9 times out of 10, I find that people find the same thing. Their intuition is quiet. It's like a little idea that drops in your head, just a little quiet idea. And it's easy then to go, oh, no, I don't do that and dismiss it. And we just think it's our thought processes. But if people think about this process, the next time it happens, does it really sound like that voice that's going, what shall I have for dinner tonight? Or is it ever so slightly different? Okay. And you might just get a feeling that you should take that brolly, or you look at it as you're going out the door and you're like, do you know what? I'm going to take that with me. And the reason you've picked it up is because you haven't had time to think about it because you're rushing out the door. If you'd had more time, you'd probably go, oh no, I can't be bothered. I'll leave it there. I don't need that. So, firstly, always find out how your intuition communicates with you because that's a massive, massive part of it. The next issue is, as you rightly say, people doubt it. And that's because we live in a very logical, intellectual world. People value intellect and logic, they don't value intuition. unless they're coming to me for a reading, in which case they do. So the problem is that we are brought up to be logical and to be intellectual. And I'm sure lots of your listeners can identify with, if you did have an imaginary friend, you'd have parents going, "Oh, don't be so silly. You're just being over imaginative." Or, "Don't be silly. You're being a drama queen." Or, "Don't be silly. You're just attention seeking." And depending on what it is that your intuition was doing, like maybe you are one of those kids that would walk up to them and go, "I can see your grandma behind you." And the parents will go, "Oh, just got an overactive imagination, just ignore her," you know? And eventually we become smaller because we don't want to be judged. We don't want to be told off by our parents. We don't want to stand out from the other kids in the class either. And so it it gets knocked out of us. And so by the time that we're old enough to talk about intuition, think about it, value it, it's so buried under years and years of training. And teachers can be terrible for it as well, because daydreaming is a type of intuition. You're just letting it do free form. And then your teachers go and pay attention, stop looking out the window. And so undoing all of that training is not easy. I mean, imagine you're like 35 and you've had 35 years of people telling you, "Don't do this, don't do that." It's not an easy one, but it is doable. And I was incredibly logical because I was in financial services. And so if you can go from being super logical to super intuitive, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And I think also because part of us fears what will happen if we listen to our intuition and act on it. And part of it is worried what will happen if we don't act on it. And so we get the analysis paralysis. And then on top of that, like you say, we live in such a noisy world. You know, we're on our phones, scrolling through social media, YouTube videos, radio, TV, our thoughts. There's very little space for us to hear that intuition if we don't give it a bit of a chance to run riot on its own.
From a nervous system perspective, this is really interesting because when the system's dysregulated, signals feel confusing. But when the system is more regulated, people often describe a clearer sense of that internal knowing that you're talking about. So, in many ways, intuition and nervous system regulation are closely connected, even though maybe that's not the way it's classified in that logical arm of things.
Absolutely. And one of the things I do if people are coming to me for an ongoing development circle where we get a group of us together and practice different skill sets, I will get them to re regulate by putting the hand to the heart chakra, otherwise known as the vagus nerve, which connects to every organ in the body virtually. And when we have a shock, how often do you go, you know? So it's an instinctive calming process to put that hand to the heart chakra and bring the body back down. But my theory is, please don't shoot me, anybody. My theory is that we spend so much time being overstimulated by video, social media, other people, just the world. It's really difficult to be in that calm enough state to be able to single out that intuition when you've got all these other things going on within you. So it is important. I know it's boring to people, but it is important to re regulate ourselves. Even if you just do that by some breath work, like box breathing through the day, you don't have to sit and meditate and go om. You can just literally do it while you're walking around, you're on hold, you're in the queue to get lunch, and just practice this breathing through the day. Practice putting the hand to the heart, and that will just keep bringing you back down. And then you won't be so amped up. Whereas when we're just layering up the whole time and we're not chilling ourselves out, it's really, really hard. And I often say to people, "Oh, what do you do to relax?" "Oh, I like to watch horror movies." It's like, no, because the brain doesn't understand the difference between real and imagined, as you know. And so if you're watching a horror movie or a scary drama or anything like that that makes you go, straight away, you're not chilled out. anything but. And, if someone came at you firing an AK-47, that's not relaxing, but that's what you're watching on the TV. Or even if you've got Sky News on rolling 24/7, So, people, even when they are relaxing, they're not relaxing. And that all counts against us when we're trying to do work with our intuition.
And I feel really in my experience, it's really hard to do much of anything in life when your sympathetic nervous system is always overstimulated and it's always on overdrive. It's harder to learn, right? It's harder to digest our food. It's harder to sleep and it's harder to really come into that presence with yourself and really be with, who you are, that intuitive part of you.
Mm.
You also mentioned helping people release trauma through somatic and intuitive practices. For someone who's new to that idea, what does it actually mean to release trauma from the body? What might someone notice as they began that process?
Okay, so I'm going to mash up a couple of clients here. So I had a client in their 70s who came to me with chronic pain in their upper chest and neck. They'd been to their osteopath and they said, "Your problem is not down to an osteopath. Your problem is trapped emotion. Go and find someone that can help you." And they came to me. Now, this person had been through all sorts of problems in their life, all sorts of trauma, including waking up next to a partner who deceased in the night and just, stuff that would stress anybody out. And when we did the work, so I'll do a little mini explanation of what I would do. I would get them into a nice light meditation, but they're still awake and cognizant of what's going on. And then I would get them to tell me where the pain is in their body. So let's say it's in the upper neck. And then I would ask them to follow that back through time, which is called timeline therapy. And then there'll be a memory at the root of it. So in this particular client, we will say that they were 4 years old, they're at nursery school, mum's dropped them off, and the nursery workers, which is standard form in the UK, I will say, said to mum, as soon as they're occupied, just get the hell out before they notice. And that's what they did. So 4-year-old child turns around, mummy's gone, meltdown. They've spent 4 years with this caregiver who's suddenly disappeared from their life. And I get what the nursery school teachers were doing, and I get that, but this poor child was traumatized. Mum came back, everything was okay, completely forgot this memory. And from the age of 4 onwards, they had huge abandonment issues. Every single interpersonal relationship they had, colleagues, friends, partners, family, everything, they had this massive obsession with abandonment. Even if somebody won the lottery and moved the other side of the country, they took that really personally and they would overgive in their interpersonal relationships because they'd got this thing in their head that if they were really good and really generous, this person wouldn't leave their life. So then we change the emotional perception of that memory because it is scary to a 4-year-old, but it's not scary to a 70-year-old. So we can completely change that. And then we find where that emotion is trapped in the body. And obviously, with this client, we know it was the neck and shoulder because of where it was, but also it's in the heart chakra and the throat chakra because they couldn't express themselves and say, "I'm scared, what's going on?" So we give it a color and a shape and a texture and everything else. And then I ask what they want to do with it. And it's like, I want to pull it out and throw it into outer space or whatever it might be. And then the pain goes, the health condition goes, the trauma has been changed into something that's no longer traumatic. And they just feel lighter and brighter and happier because of it. And some things we can clear up in just one session. Some things need multiple sessions depending on how deep it is or how many layers there are. Because, as most people have probably found out by now, even doing the self work, it's not one layer. You think you've done it, and then 10 years later, it comes to the surface, and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? I thought it dealt with that. So it can take multiple sessions to clear certain things away, but all of it comes down to whatever trauma we've experienced, whether it's parents getting divorced, the teacher picking on us at school, being bullied, or whatever it might be. And sometimes it can be our own beliefs. We think we're not good enough. We think we're not worthy. And everything that we think and do is from that root. And therefore, it's going to create more of that stuff that proves we're not good enough and we're not worthy. And so we're just getting re traumatized the whole time. So we can actually completely transform someone's life going forwards because they're not using the same story to drive them forwards. So it's so many layers in that.
It's so yeah, and it's so important for people to understand that trauma doesn't only live in your memory. It lives in your body, it lives in your muscle tension, it lives in, your breath patterns, your nervous system responses. Healing involves helping the body complete those processes often that were interrupted.
Mhm.
Another part of your work is helping people develop their own intuitive and psychic abilities. That can feel intimidating or even accessible to some listeners. Maybe this is new for them. How do you approach that in a way that feels safe and grounded?
Okay, so, such a big subject. As I said, the first thing I want to do is get people to know how their intuition communicates to them. And more often than not, once we start talking about it, they'll be like, oh, yeah, yeah, I get that. Oh, is that my intuition? Okay, great. So, having that knowledge of what you're looking for is massive. Otherwise, you might as well be looking for a needle in a haystack. Then we like to build the trust bank, as I call it, which involves doing things like journaling. I felt like I should take my umbrella with me. Did I take it? No. What happened? I got wet. Did I take it? Yes. Did it rain? Yes. Did I get dry? Yes. So you can see the outcome of these little nudges. I felt like my little boy George was in trouble, and I rang the nursery and they said he'd been unwell and that he was crying for his mummy. You know, it's not life changing. You're not going to win the lottery with it. But when you know it's there and you trust it and act on it, life tends to be a lot less challenging and a lot less brutal emotionally. And it just flows more. Okay. Yes, you can have big intuitive nudges. We were talking about it recently. Do you remember those two planes that went missing really close together? There was a lady and her family due on the first flight, and she just rang up and went, "We're gonna reschedule our flights, thanks very much." And then the plane went missing, and she was like, "Oh my god, I'm so glad that I just felt I needed to do that." So it can be huge, but the trouble is sometimes we will know immediately. Like, let's say I don't know, you decide to get the bus, not the train, and then suddenly everyone's talking about the train that derailed or got delayed, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I listened and got on the bus instead. Sometimes it might take months before you find out why this all unfolded in the way it did. And sometimes it can take years. And sometimes you never find out what was going on. You just have to trust and believe and act on it. So the more you've got your journal with all these times that you listened and it worked out, you'll build your trust. If there are times when this intuition said, do this or don't do this, and it went wrong in inverted commas, why did it go wrong? Was that really your intuition telling you to do it or not do it? Or was it your ego? Or did you misunderstand? Or did you just simply not listen and you sailed on regardless? And it's about being honest because the only person that's going to miss out if you're not honest with yourself is yourself. But literally, the more frequently you can see that I listened and this happened and I'm glad I listened, eventually you won't even put it in your journal because you'll just go, I'm going to listen. And that's where I'm at these days. I can't remember the last time I ignored it because it's just too much hassle to ignore it. So I help people find little ways in their day that they can flex that muscle because I refer to it as a muscle as well, and to just follow where it takes them and to then sit back and think about what's happened and why. Okay. So in my Facebook group, once a week, I give them an intuitive exercise to do. And this week it was cheese, pick a cheese. So I choose the cheese and I tell them what the exercise is. And then at the end of the day, I post the response, so they know what the answer is. And the idea is that their intuition is going to tell them what it smelt like, what it felt like, what it looked like. And they'll tell me which cheese it is that I picked, or which song, or which car, or whatever it might be. And it's interesting how many people are right, but it's more interesting how many people get led astray because they'll pick the first thing that pops in their head, but they haven't followed the process, or they'll get, what's the word, led astray by the picture. So if I put a picture of a cheese board, something on the cheese board might grab their attention and they'll go with that rather than listening to their intuition. So understanding where you went awry is generally, for me anyway, more powerful than why it went right. Because when you know what you didn't do or what you should have listened to, you go, "Ah, yeah, I did get that, but I dismissed it." Or I did get that, but I thought it can't possibly be that. And I know Tracy likes Stilton, so I'm going to put Stilton as the answer. And so I honestly think there's more power in getting these things wrong to begin with than getting them right so that you can understand the process more.
It's all part of that learning process, I think. You talk about helping people live in alignment with both their spiritual and their human aspects, and that's such an important idea because so many people feel split between those parts of themselves. Can you tell us a little bit about what integration might look like in their daily life?
Okay. Yeah. So a lot of people come to me and say, look, I don't want to do tarot readings. I don't want to talk to dead people, but I know that there's more to life. There has to be more than you're born, you live with tragedy, and then you die. And those are the people that are looking for answers. And it's, even if they can't put it into words, it's things like, is there life after death? I've just lost somebody. Are they okay? What happens? So it's those sorts of things you can't always put into words. And so it's little things like learning to work with your intuition, because my life is easier when I follow my intuition. I mean, I learned a long time ago not to make big decisions without listening to my intuition, but even small things like, I'm being guided to come off a junction early, so I'm going to come off. And then I find out that the traffic was at a standstill because of an accident and I'd have been sat there for 2 hours. That's 2 hours I could do something else with. So it's small in the scheme of things, but those things mount up. So it means that I do things for the right reasons. I feel guided to do them rather than, well, society tells me I have to, or I need to conform. So when people come to me and they're looking to balance their spiritual and their human, they're looking for things that make life easier. They're looking for answers to the questions they don't even know that they have. They want to be able to make decisions that are right for them rather than doing the wrong things. They may not necessarily want to sit and have conversations with their loved ones who have passed or their spirit guides, but actually they do want to communicate and understand how the universe, their guides, their angels, their loved ones speak to them and how to identify those messages around them. They want to understand about things like soul plans and soul contracts and soul plan meetings and all of the kind of stuff that has shaped their arrival on this planet in the first place. Because let's face it, most people, there's something in their life that they're not happy with. And it might be themselves, it might be the fact that they have or haven't had children, they do or don't have relationships. Or my lady the other day, why she's got 1,000,001 narcissists around her and it drives her nuts. And it's like, why me? So by bringing her spiritual and her human selves to the things that crop up in her life, she can see that there's a deeper meaning, which is way more powerful than I'm just having a horrible life. And so it's that ability to be able to understand the tragedy, the wars, the loss, all of those things that make life on earth really, really challenging. Because as we said earlier on, I know I would feel really depressed if I just thought you were born, had this life of tragedy and hardship, and then you died. I went, that's that one over then. I can't relate to seeing that one dimensional. thing. So most of my guys that come to me, they're in the same place. They need to know that there's more going on in their life. There's more purpose, that they're here for a reason. So there's lots of different ways to align the human and the spiritual. You don't have to do tarot readings or get up in church and give messages. That's a very small percentage of my people want to do that.
I think many listeners can relate to that feeling of that fragmentation, trying to function in the world while also sensing that there's something deeper happening inside of them. And part of healing can be learning how those pieces fit together and how they work symbiotically rather than competing with one another.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that transformation can happen through small daily practices. And I think that's so important because big change can feel overwhelming.
Mm. Yeah.
What do you recommend for a small daily practice that can help someone begin shifting toward more alignment and healing?
Okay. So loads of little things, and I appreciate all of your audience has different lives. Like in the UK, some people work from home, some people don't, some have got kids, some haven't. So pick something that happens to you a lot. Like maybe you come into the building you work in and you've got a bank of elevators or lifts, as we call them in the UK. And without looking at the numbers, not think about, ask your inner self which elevator is going to arrive first. And even if you do look at the numbers, don't be tricked in going, well, that one's only one floor away. So obviously that one's going to be here first, because they might be trying to manhandle something out the lift. And actually, that's going to be the last one to arrive. So ask your inner self to predict which lift, write down if you're right or wrong, or do a little voice memo if you haven't got pen and paper. If you're out and about, you could be in the supermarket and you might ask your inner self which queue is going to move fastest. And it doesn't matter if it's the one with two people or the one with 10 people, because the one with two people, they might be doing a refund and exchange or something that's going to take forever. So that's when the conscious brain gets involved and goes, well, it's going to be that one. There's only two people. Well, I can tell you, I have got in that two-person queue and I've been there even longer than the one at the end of the 10-person queue. So it's about trusting that inner voice. And it doesn't matter if you're wrong. Okay. It's just about playing with it. When your phone rings without looking at the caller ID and assuming that it's not your mother who always rings at 6 o'clock and has her own ringtone, who's calling? It's a sales call. And you look at your phone and go, yeah, sales. Okay. Again, you're just allowing that intuition to call. I know most people don't do phone calls these days. So maybe if it's a text message, and again, same thing, you're not expecting it and it doesn't have a certain ringtone for a certain person, identify who that text is from before you look at it. And another one that I love, but people look at me like I'm mad, is if you're going out to get lunch because you're working or whatever, or you're out shopping for dinner, or you're going to a restaurant, rather than voting for your food with your eyes or your pocket, ask your inner knowing what it fancies. What does it want to eat? And you might randomly get salad and you never touch a salad. But that is your soul telling you, today, I really need salad. Or maybe you eat salads because you're always on a diet. And actually, your inner knowing says, do you know what? I just really want a ham sandwich and a bowl of soup. And about, oh, okay. And I think when you get that little surprise reaction to your own response, that's when you know it's coming from your intuition. It's not coming from your logic. And another one that I love is if you're watching the quiz shows, even if you don't know the answers, let your intuition tell you it's A, B, or C, and keep a note and see how many you got right. And again, how many did you get led astray by something they were saying on the team? Or you went, oh no, it can't be number A, it's got to be number B, and you talk yourself out of it. Because those are important as well. So there's so many ways around us that we can practice little things that aren't going to make a big impact for other people. You're not going to be made to look silly. You're not making a prediction on TV, but you are just building the trust bank and getting to that place of oh my God, I'm right more than I'm wrong. And actually, when you relax and accept that, you'll be right even more.
I heard you say be curious, be open, and collect your own data points. That's kind of what I heard to build up that trust bank that you mentioned earlier. And I'll have her to send me a written copy of those little practices that I love so much. They're so simple and easy to fit into just everyday moments in our life. One final question, Tracy. If someone listening today feels disconnected from themselves, or maybe they're unsure of how to trust their inner voice, what do you most hope that they remember about themselves from our conversation today?
So everybody's intuitive. So it's not up for debate. It's not like, can I be the next, best player on the NBA team? It is, I am intuitive. I have to give myself that space to hear it, to communicate with it, to find it, and just do those little practices. Those things that I just said about, they don't add any extra time to your day because you're already in the queue buying your lunch. You're already on the phone doing hold while you're doing the breathing and the vagus nerve. So just re regulate yourself, trust that you're intuitive, and then just find the proof that you are intuitive and build that trust bank. And little bit by little bit, day by day, the next thing you know, you will have more intuitive hits and you will just keep layering up that faith and that trust. And eventually, you won't question the intuitive nudges that you get.
Tracy, thank you for this conversation. I think what stands out most is that reminder that healing isn't about becoming something new, but it's about reconnecting with who you already are, right? To everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. If this conversation resonated with you, please consider sharing it, subscribe to this podcast, share it with the people you know. That's how these conversations travel, and the people that need to hear them get to hear them the most. I'm Dr. Sarah Young, and this is NeuroAlchemy, the Brain Body Healing Podcast. Until next time, remember this: you are not broken, you are becoming. Bye for now.
Bye.